Hello and welcome to the Deep 2 NBA podcast. My name's Sean and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boffa. Mr. Boffa, my man, how are we?
In the same room, Sean?
In the same room, which is technically illegal until 11:59 tonight, isn't it?
Don't rat us out on our own podcast.
Yeah, fuck, that's a really bad way to start, isn't it? Welcome to my room, welcome to the podcast. Good to be back together.
Sounds like it's been approximately 1 year since we've been in the same room. I forgot what you look like.
Oh yeah, good one. Yeah, I think it's been approximately 10 episodes, I would say.
No.
5 maybe.
Yeah, maybe 5. 5, maybe 6.
And you were out injured with this last week, so it's been 2 weeks since we last recorded. And for those who haven't seen the article that Dante wrote in his downtime on his perfect team, following up the perfect team series by myself and Lucas, I liken that to Jordan's flu game in written content. So Dante's tonsillitis game is greater than Jordan's flu game.
This is the written equivalent of 65 points. Like I've bumped Jordan. I bumped him. Read it. It's on the blog now, and Sean did some very pretty illustrations. But like you mentioned before, we've missed a lot of stuff not recording last week, and there's been a kind of like a bit of an earthquake of NBA news as things have started to like shake into place, and people are now like seriously, things are going from concepts to making plans. One of which is the idea of the NBA playing in a bubble and bringing all the playoff teams into a secure, safe location, playing all the games with all of the staff. So one place that has been suggested is the Walt Disney Resort in Orlando, and another place that's been suggested is Las Vegas, where they play the Summer League.
Las Vegas, that clean place where no one gets in any infections. Yeah, do you like the idea of playing in a bubble?
Not really. But then I was listening to, like, just when I hear the idea, my instinct is not really. But then I was listening to someone, I can't remember who, talk about it, and they were like, it could be like Summer League, like Vegas Summer League, where there's like multiple games on every day, and it's kind of like a
round robin.
Yeah, like a round robin with like a fun atmosphere, and like everyone's in the same place, and it would come at you really thick and fast, and you'd need, it could be cool, but I don't like it as much as I like there being no virus and us just finishing the season. Yeah,
well, I was listening to, I'm going to get his name right, not that it's hard to pronounce that, I forgot what it was. It was an Indiana beat writer for the Indiana Star. It was Jay Michael, and he opened the podcast when he was speaking with Nate Duncan and straight up said, I think they should just punt the season. This is coming from an Indiana perspective, where maybe he's better off going into next season with a bit of a young team, but he said no matter what happens, let's say we play the whole season and Milwaukee wins, right? People are going to say, well, that's not like LeBron beating Golden State. That's, that asterisk title where he beat the Clippers when, these guys hadn't played in 2 weeks or something, or these guys hadn't trained with an actual basketball court. So, if we're going to look back on this regardless and say, well, look, they won, but, or they did this, but, or they were going to get 74 wins, but should we just punt the rest of the season and say, look, bad luck, guys, let's just move on to the next year? Or do we have to have a champion just because we have to have a champion? Would you rather go on Basketball Reference 10 years from now and see Milwaukee Bucks asterisks, or just, there was a world pandemic?
Does there need to be an asterisk though? Or will the asterisk just be...
There probably won't be an asterisk.
If you could ensure that everyone was coming back on level, like on a level playing field, that no one had more time to prepare than anybody else, and that everyone was kind of like, the competition was still fair, then I don't see why you wouldn't do it. And it just, like, if you don't finish the season and there's no champion, like, can you award an MVP? Can you do awards? Can you do all NBA, or does everything? Because I think if you were going to not finish the season, like if you were going to punt on the playoffs and not finish the season, I don't think you can award an MVP, and I don't think you can do all NBA, because then you could say, well, like, you don't base it off of 64 games or 67 games or whatever each team's played. Like, if you don't finish the season, you don't finish the season. But that's no fun. No one wants, like, I don't really like buying into like it's good for the population's psyche that we do this. Like, I think that's just like corporate greed dressed up as like trying to look, trying to look good. But no one, I think, in the NBA or NBA fans really like wants them to just say like, you know what, fuck it, let's just move on and we'll just plan for next season.
Yeah, but the later we push it back, and the later, if we and ah about doing the bubble, not that it's our decision, but the later we do this, we're sort of encroaching on next season. So let's say we play the rest of this and we have a playoffs with 7-game series, maybe the first round's five games again, just like what it used to be, and then we do that, but then it sort of creeps into the next season, and then next season, which is looking like it's going to start later, they miss the first 20 games of the year and start on Christmas, for example. So then you finish this season, but then you've impacted on the next season. Is that another issue that we should worry about?
I think so. The discussion about that is twofold. Is that one, there's talk that the NBA had been wanting to push the season start date back anyway, just so that you minimise the amount of time that they compete with the NFL, and so they push it back. They push the start date back to when the NFL playoffs start, and then by the time the NBA season is in full swing, the NFL's done, and the NBA has, in theory, a higher market share. So they want. That's potentially like it's something that they want to do anyway, and this could provide the impetus to do that. But then the other thing to think about is, you could just why not try that next season as being like a 72-game season. I think if they do the playoffs, it'll be in a condensed time frame, and they won't have quite so long an off season, and they won't like be quite so leisurely in terms of.
Just ignore that.
They won't be quite so leisurely in terms of the spacing of off-season events like the lottery and the draft, and even training camp. Like if you condensed the season by 10 games and then you condensed everything in the off-season by 25%, you could probably put it in and just do it. You know? And you would have to say, when looking at if you don't play the full regular season slate either this year or next year, you will have to put an asterisk in and say, like, when talking about the best regular season team of all time,
73 wins and stuff.
Yeah, because Milwaukee was like on pace. That would have to be the asterisk. But then I don't think you'd need to put an asterisk on the champion.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a good test case, because the NBA and Adam Silver has flirted with shortening the length of the season. That's one thing that he said when he came in as commissioner. And this sort of goes back to the argument that you have with the shortened season, because if you shorten the season, well, then Golden State has the record for the rest of history. And how much do you factor in a 70% win percentage compared to someone having the same or higher win percentage in a smaller amount of games? And that's sort of personal preference, because that's something that's been debated about a lot. But going back to this bubble point, what happens with the players' families? Because I was talking about this with a friend of mine, and a friend who isn't into basketball at all, and is actually sitting in the next room, and her immediate thought was, well, what about their families? And I'm like, I guess they could all just come, or maybe they could not come. And she goes, well, that sucks, because all these families are going to get like distanced and inside this bubble away from their friends and families, or adversely, the players are going to get locked off from their friends and families. And then I'm a bit like, look, some of these guys are making $30 million a year. I think you could just say no to your family for a couple of months, and that's also me just saying, like, stuff you. But there is a human element here, where what if one of these guys don't see their family for a while, or what if one of the trainers or one of the coaches or anyone just can't do that? Because some people, you can imagine it could be really hard on people. Is that going to be another variable that we have to worry about?
Well, I think you need to bring the families in.
Yeah.
Because asking someone to stay away from their family for 2 months is pretty unreasonable.
Where do you draw the line? Like second cousin? Or?
No, it would be immediate family. It would be like your wife and your kids. Like, I don't even think you'd need to bring like mums in unless some people, some NBA players are really close with their mums. Like, have like a different relationship with their mums than what we do. Some of them live with their mum, that sort of thing. So I think unless they were like carers, unless the mum was like dependent, or the parents like dependent, they probably wouldn't be included. But if you had a partner and kids, or even just a partner, I think they should definitely be allowed to come in. Because like, think about like if you're when you're home, like obviously you're on the road quite a bit.
Yeah.
But like, you know, take like Jason Tatum, like someone who's young, but he's got kids. Like Jason Tatum, it's not really fair to the NBA to be like, Jason Tatum, you're coming away for 2 months, and then Jason Tatum has to be like to his wife, hey, I can't help you raise these 2 young kids at all. Like you're on your own for 2 months. Like it's not really fair. And like LeBron James probably wouldn't want to leave his kids for 2 months. And
just normal humans wouldn't.
Yeah, not exactly. Well, exactly what I'm saying though. But I mean, like at the top of the league, you've got a guy who probably wouldn't want to leave his kids, and then scattered throughout the league, like Jason Tatum's not a nobody, but he's like much lower down the totem pole. But you've even got young players like him who are not going to want to leave their family. So I think you need to bring them into the bubble, and you'd also need to afford the same thing to team staff, so trainers and anyone who's going to come into the bubble. Like if you're
if you're a media guy?
Well, if you're then same thing. Like you can't just say to people, we are going to make you spend 2 months away from your family in pursuit of
Adam Silver's like boot camp guys.
Boot camp. Like we need to hit certain corporate profits, so you have to stay away from your family for 2 months.
Everyone bring $20. We're going to go to Coles on the Saturday.
So I think that if the bubble's going to happen, they need to
make it a big bubble.
Make it a big bubble. Yeah.
That's the thing that I think. What's the reason why I don't think this is going to happen? Because you've got such a big bubble, which is fair enough. We've sort of said that this needs to happen, and for the bubble to work, you need to constantly be testing these guys, constantly testing. That obviously takes testing kits. And if you're going to have all these franchises and all this whole league has a shit ton of money, and they could buy all the tests they want, but there were problems with limited tests and limited masks early in coronavirus. I don't know if it's
in America. It's still a problem
in America. Yeah. So if you're going to have this league, cordon off everyone, have a bubble, and just get these tests in and out, so that we here in Melbourne can watch a basketball game, they're going to have really, really good PR staff, or just everyone's just going to have to turn a blind eye to the fact that there are probably people in need who are getting overstepped by this big body corporate that is just saying, we need the test because we need to test all our players so they can play a basketball game, which very hard optics.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think need to be pretty. If they were going to do that, they'd need to be pretty confident that they could rely on the goodwill of people being like, "Oh, like I'm so glad sports back." The NFL had their draft about a month. No, it was probably about like 3 weeks ago. I think it was like April, towards the end of April. And they were criticised really heavily from some areas of sports media for going ahead with the draft. It was obviously like not in person, like an event. They did it virtually, and just like the broadcast was beamed out everywhere. But they copped a lot of flack initially from people being like, this is irresponsible. Like you should just cancel it and delay it, postpone it. But then when it happened, and in the lead up to it, and in the days after, the overwhelming sentiment from people was like, oh my God, I'm just so happy that it felt normal that I had sport. I had something that I could, the sports journalists are saying there's something for me to write about. I can write an article like top 5 best picks. The people who are watching the draft are like, oh my God, I can really, look at, is my team going to be good? Like just, it felt really good to have sport. So they need to be, the NBA would need to be thinking that they could have a reaction similar to that, where people would overlook the fact that there are people dying. And in America, it's quite grim. Like there are people really, like in Victoria at least, we've like largely stemmed the flow of new infections, and the ones that are people are getting medical treatment. In America, people are dying at rates that are daily rates that are like 10 times bigger than our country's entire death toll. So for them, it's a huge problem. And it would, like you said, it would be really bad optics that the NBA is letting people, who potentially need tests, not get them. But then that feeds into a whole discussion about like, the American medical system, and how they, is the NBA responsible for the American medical system's inability to get people the tests?
Well, that's why people tune into our podcast, because they want to hear about the healthcare debate. So, Dante, my next question is... Now, let's move on. Rolling on from there, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic again, the NBA has duly postponed the draft, lottery and combine, and later on, I mean, we'll just talk about it now, that the NBA is looking to do the combine through virtually. So if some of these players, I'm thinking more about the international players, if these guys are in Germany, for example, Killian Hayes, I don't know where he is at the moment, but he played in Germany last season. So these guys probably won't be able to fly internationally for the foreseeable future, maybe for the rest of the year. So this might be their only chance to actually sit down, play basketball in a gym in front of these guys that might become their boss. And I would sell my kidney to be on that Zoom call. How interesting would that be?
Pricey kidney.
It is a pricey kidney, or a cheap kidney, you tell me.
Pricey. I just wonder, so is there going to need to be like an NBA approved personnel there to like make sure that the drills
It's
are all
the right
being
size
done?
rings.
Or what if I don't know, like what if Tony Thompson lives in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota and he can't like get to a basketball court and can't get like all the cones and can't get the NBA is going to need to send them all their
care packages,
all the equipment. It seems like it's going to be like a pretty big undertaking, but by postponing it, obviously they give themselves a lot of time to figure out how that can actually happen. And Kevin O'Connor reported that they're looking to move the draft to August or September, so that gives them 3 to 4 months to figure out the logistics. You'd think that the combine would need to happen probably like maybe like 6 weeks before the draft, so that teams have enough time to really dig in and find out if this if this 44-inch vertical really changes the team's grade from second round to late first.
Well, that's something that I've heard Sam Vecini talk about in the last couple of weeks. He's a guy who covers the draft for The Athletic, and he was saying a lot of the times everyone watches the games, you've watched all the tape, you've watched every single minute of basketball this guy plays, but all of a sudden Marquise Chris comes into a workout with the Suns. He comes into a workout with the Suns, and everyone gets hot every now and again, and he just has an incredible workout, and then the team goes, well, that's incredible, like this is who he is, we just couldn't see it on the tape, we needed to see him in person. And sometimes that can skew the way that teams view players, just because for an hour that they're actually sitting there in front of them they played really well, or sometimes the workouts don't even matter. I think it was Stephen Curry who famously declined to work out for the Golden State Warriors, and they picked him anyway because they thought he was the best player available. He was.
Johnny Flynn wasn't? Oh, Johnny Flynn was already gone too.
Rick Rubio. So this actually might be a blessing in disguise if the combine isn't, if Johnny or Tony Thompson in North Dakota can't actually get like a full workout in. These teams who were looking at a draft that was already all over the place, there's no number one in Zion, and there's no March Madness darling in John Morant, who's a clear number 2. Like, people already didn't know who was going to be the number 1 pick, and the fact that views aren't going to be skewed probably by some incredible workout, because there's probably not going to be an incredible workout, might actually be good for players. And it'd be funny if we actually see a more return to normal and just see maybe 1 through 15 just be like a slow rise into players becoming good. That's probably not going to happen. There's no way to measure this at all, but that's a silver lining. For a team who I go for who has a high pick, I'm happy.
I think the draft will probably be more of a crapshoot than usual in a draft where
it's already
a bit of a crapshoot, at least at the top. At least, like, as much as we desperately crave like the ability to be told this is the best guy, so that we can all be like, oh, fire up the hype machine. This time it's like, some people are telling you that the best guy is this guy from France who you've never even heard of, let alone seen. Or they're saying it's Anthony Edwards, this guy from Georgia, who you're like, oh, Georgia. Like, Georgia has a basketball team? What? Americans don't know that Georgia has a basketball team. They think Georgia's just a football school. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a crapshoot draft regardless. But yeah, this definitely is not going to help. Although, you know what? just to kind of contradict everything that I just said, NBA, like you mentioned with Marquise Chris, NBA teams are pretty good at having all of the information and making fucking dumb decisions anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe this protects them from themselves.
Especially teams that have had Marquise Chris until this season.
Yeah, yeah. I'm getting like 2016-17 flashbacks.
All right, let's move on then. So this is a quote from John Wall on the All the Smoke podcast. All the Smoke podcast has actually been pumping out the episodes with guests left, right, and centre.
I've been getting good guests, haven't I?
So that is with Matt Barnes and Stephen Jackson. And John Wall quotes, "Damn near the whole 5 years I was an all-star. I played with 2 bone spurs in my knee and heel. People don't know that. They ain't even got the best of John Wall. They've got a clip of him." So is there more John Wall to come? Dante, just tell me why not.
No, I think John Wall is going to go back to being 20-10. I genuinely do think that.
Yeah.
I also just think that the Wizards are going to go back to winning 45 games and losing in the first round every year.
That's fair
with
enough.
regards to John Wall on this specific quote, John Wall is so vocal and so in your face and so protective of his game and sensitive to any perceived criticism. I find it pretty interesting that he has waited to this date to tell us that he had bone spurs when he was an all-star. He didn't tell us in the moment, I'm playing with bone spurs, or he has been out of basketball for over a year and he's now only just been like, I'm going to tell you that I got bone spurs. Seems like the timing seems suspect. If you had bone spurs, I feel like John Wall is the exact type of player who'd be like, don't judge me on this, I've got bone spurs. Which, you know what, if you do, that's fair enough. That sounds really painful. But I resent the idea that John Wall can use it in posterity and just be like, hey, you don't know, I was severely injured for that entire time.
It's like that basketball player who blames the win.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, legit.
I still believe in him, but yeah, we've gone through that before. Next up from Mark Berman and the New York Post is that Brooklyn and Houston are joining the Knicks in pursuit of Tom Thibodeau. What I can't understand is that Houston already has one of the best coaches in the league in Mike D'Antoni. Why are they jumping in the race to get a coach who just coached poorly in his last stop?
I sense that this has more to do with Tillman Fertitta.
Dirty fingers.
Dirty fingers Tillman. Than it does with Daryl Morey.
Doesn't seem like a Daryl Morey guy.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a Daryl Morey guy.
A defensive-minded guy who hasn't proven that he can coach his teams to defend in his last stop.
Yeah. And who hasn't proven that he can run a league average offense in 6 years.
Yeah, and depending on the day, Kyrie Irving either wants a ex-player in Tyronn Lue or he doesn't want an ex-player and he wants just a new guy to come in and, you're just flipping a coin.
If Kyrie Irving is deluded enough to convince himself that he wants Tom Thibodeau, the first day of practice when Tom Thibodeau's on the sideline yelling, "Ice, ice, ice," and Kyrie's like, "Bro, I just want to play basketball. I'm an artist." He's going to be like, "Fuck, what have I done?"
Yeah.
That is a relationship, Kyrie Irving and Tom Thibodeau, that would end in fucking disaster. The Brooklyn Nets would probably cease to be an organization after that partnership.
It's such a shame they've come so far. Obviously, they've got Kevin Durant coming back and he's one of the best players in the world, but, we're sort of writing him off before it's even happened because they've done everything right up until just the winning bit when it comes to they've got the 2 players on the team, but then they got DeAndre Jordan. They had a young coach who was proven to be good, and then they fired him. So, yeah, maybe chirping as a franchise.
I think the thing that we've skipped over so far is what happens if he goes to the Knicks? If he goes to the Knicks, RJ Barrett, his career's done.
Oh, are we talking about who are we talking about?
Tommy
Thibodeau?
Yeah.
Nah, you can't say that.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean,
you have to have a career to begin at. Can I just say one thing that we haven't got written down in the news, but New York Knicks, they are refunding season tickets for the rest of the season. They've just pretty much said, look, the season's not going to happen, or if it does, here's your money back. And also included in that, there's some way that this happens, but they're giving out free RJ Barrett jerseys with those season ticket holders.
Means that they had a lot of them left over.
How lucky are they? I wish I was a season ticket holder now. I don't know about Tom Tibbs. I
know about him.
I mean, yeah, I just don't really want to put too much stock in this because, he might go to the Knicks, but I don't want to say that RJ Barrett's career is going to. Why do you say that?
I have no faith in Tom Thibodeau being able to nurture young players in being
Cat
good.
And Wiggins.
Yeah. The only young talent he's ever nurtured was Derrick Rose, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Derrick Rose's emergence in Chicago was more about transcendent talent rather than scheme or coaching fit. So I want to see RJ have the best chance that he can to succeed.
That's a big limb to go out on.
Yeah, I want to see it. I mean, I love big guards like that. They're big bodied, big bootied guards. I want to see him. I want to see if he's good. I don't want to, I'm not like an RJ fan or whatever. I just want to see if he actually is good.
Yeah, you want to give him a chance.
I don't want to say in 3 years he never had a chance. He's with Tom Thibodeau. You know. Poor Kevin Knox. Imagine Kevin Knox with Tom Thibodeau. Kevin Knox will be out of the league next year if Tom Thibodeau goes to the Knicks.
Imagine Kevin Knox.
Yeah, wow.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Monsieur Tony Parcours has bought a French Pro A men's and women's basketball club in, I don't know if this is an acronym, but Asvel, and it is a town just outside of Lyon. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but that is from Mark Spears of The Undefeated. And when he bought the team, literally sitting on the podium, talking about buying this French team, he said that his goal is to own an NBA team one day. And that's cool, sick, that's a good goal to have. Why are you saying that on the introductory press conference to this team that you just bought that isn't an NBA team? That's you've just been hired for a new job and you're sitting there on day one saying, cool, so I'll can't wait to get to the next place, but this is just a stepping stone. You wait to see me in 10 years. It's... Yeah.
When you put it like that, it does seem a bit weird. Like the Asvel Lyon Villeurbanne basketball team is probably
you're a bigger man than I.
Is probably so you don't really care about us at all. But you know what? That team at the very least, even if Tony is an absentee owner trying to get to the NBA, trying to make it to the big leagues, that team is going to have 100 times more money than I had before.
Cool. That's just to go along with their healthcare debate. There's the economics debate. 100 times more money. So next up, God, this is pretty straightforward. But the salary cap is guaranteed to be lowered as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is from Mark Berman of the New York Post. It was projected to be just above 109 million, and every NBA team is operating as such. This is obviously, this is not going to happen because coronavirus, but something that would have been interesting to know is that, I'll just move on to that next one. So the NBA and the NBA Players Association has decided to extend the deadline for the next CBA and waiting to see the financial impacts of COVID. That's from Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, but something that I was not excited, but excited to see heading into this, what next year's salary would look like is how much lower the number would be as a result of the China Daryl Morey debate, because it seems like ages ago, but China still isn't streaming Houston Rockets games, and they've cut back on the amount of games that they're streaming because of the Daryl Morey tweet. So it's a bit like you can't tell if you overseasoned your steak if you burnt the steak. So the number's going to be completely low, and a lot of that, or some of that, is probably going to be attributed to China and Daryl Morey. We just don't know what fraction of the number lower is. So, bummer. We know that's been bad, and this is just getting from bad to worse, but at least Adam Silver and his bunch of PR guys will be able to cover it up, say, look, the number's down because of COVID. I don't know what that China debacle is. We've moved on.
Yeah, it's a good cover in a PR sense that they can just sleep it under the rug and move on. But it is interesting with regards to what the projected cap is going to be, because max deals among other deals which are less relevant than the max, they're calculated as a percentage of the cap. So when you hear Ben Simmons signs 5-year 170 or whatever it ended up being, I think it was 5-year 170 $1 million deal, that or maybe it was 5-year 140. Anyway, when you hear Ben Simmons signs his 5-year deal, the number that you hear is just, is the percentage of the cap at 22.5% for Ben Simmons' rookie max, and he puts that on, puts that onto whatever the cap is. The cap's 120, so it's 22.5% of 120. But if the cap's only 105, the season that max kicks in, which for players like Ben Simmons and Pascal Siakam, that's this year. Yeah. Their numbers are going to be lower if they don't do something to artificially boost it. So they might not end up saying a 5-year whatever it ends up being. They might only end up saying a 5-year. Ben Simmons might say like a 5-year 145 or something rather than a 5-year 170.
I reckon we should look into that and get back to that, because I think once you ink it, like with Steph Curry's deal or John Wall's deal, once you ink it, that is the percentage of the cap for the length of the contract, right? And it's got whatever 8% raises or 4% raises on top of the number that you initially inked, and that is to go along with, like, you're assuming with the raise in the contract, you're assuming that the player is going to get better in inverted commas, and the salary cap's going to go up. So I don't know if, like, yes, going into next season, is Ben Simmons' number going to be lower because he hasn't actually started it yet. But with John Wall, his number that he originally started on was a percentage of that cap, and it's grown since there. I don't know if John Wall's is going to be shit. I should have done a bit of homework, but this is juicy shit. If John Wall's number is at X and the salary cap is at X plus 10, but the salary cap's fallen to X minus 10, and you've got John Wall still operating on the same number as the old cap, is all of a sudden you've got less than 109 million, but instead of John Wall having 30% of that, because the cap's gone down by whatever the number is, then he's going to have like 50% of that. Is that, because that could really hamper some teams. And does the NBA give out sort of care packages there, and do they give out sort of a mini JobKeeper stimulus boost and say, well, look, if you've got this, we're just going to ignore that number, they'll calculate the difference somehow? Or going off that, are there some teams that were, some teams are just riding the tax, like the Denver Nuggets, and they knew this was going to be at 109, and they had their salary, like their team salary, just below that. All of a sudden that number's come out from below them, and they're a tax team where they didn't want to be a tax team.
There'll be a lot of teams that will be tax teams if they didn't want to be, when they didn't want to be a tax team.
And especially as Golden State, when they did the whole D'Angelo Russell trade, one reason they attached Jacob Evans and Amari Spellman, and it made me sad that Amari Spellman was going, is because that was a tax move, so they could duck under the tax this year, and then next year they wouldn't be hard capped, right? So is the NBA going to sort of help these teams out and say, look, well, you technically got under the number, you did good, but from circumstances outside of your control, you're now doing the thing that you didn't want to do. How do they help those teams, and is there going to be a bias in the way they help those teams? Because what if one team who's in the tax right now says, oh, well, we had this deal in the workings to trade X player and we were going to get under the salary, where's our help? Because now that trade just isn't there anymore. So there's so many questions. Yeah,
I think regardless of what happens, regardless of what direction the NBA chooses to go, there'll need to be either like a smoothing of the luxury tax numbers, so that not everyone just doesn't get pushed into the luxury tax by this, and the teams that aren't making money at the moment would have to then pay luxury tax, which could potentially cripple them. You'd hate to talk about multi-billion-dollar owners being potentially crippled, but like it's not good, and there's no way that the NBA would do that. So they're going to need to do some creative accounting. But yeah, making sure that it's fair and administered it equally, and yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a real challenge. But we don't quite know how they're going to play it because they're keeping everything so close to their vest at the moment. Aside from the reportings of a few intrepid journalists, all you're hearing is that they're prepared for everything, that they've got a game plan for every eventuality, which is good. But yeah, some of us, give us a juicy nugget. At Adam Silver.
All right, so moving on to other juicy nuggets. Sean Marion, according to Michael Lee of The Athletic in an interview, said that Sean Marion, he believes he is not in the Hall of Fame because of, quote, "I know it's a political thing," unquote. And we talked about this point before we went on air, and you and I both said, what's the political thing?
Yeah.
Dante, have we got any progression with that, with that story?
I went for a bit of a sleuth to see if I could figure out exactly what the politics that's keeping Sean Marion out of the league are. In the interview, he didn't refuse, but he didn't exactly position himself as a fountain of information when asked to elaborate on what the political aspects were. He said, "It's a lot more other stuff going on." So, Sean Marion, you can't shut him up. You can't. He just keeps giving you information. Yeah, I don't know. I think Sean Marion should be in the Hall of Fame. He has a very interesting statistical case, and I think with four All-Star appearances and 2 All-NBA spots, a key role on a championship team, and he was like one of the best players on the 7 Seconds or Less Suns, which is like a seminal, like if you had to rank like the top 10 most important teams in NBA history, you'd probably rank like the 03 to 08 Suns somewhere in the latter half of that.
Or even just the team that beat LeBron the first time as well, like first time in Miami. That's a big team as well to be on.
Well, yeah, exactly, that Mavs team, like maybe the most unlikely champion of all time.
Yeah.
He one thing that's been pointed out since this interview with Michael Lee aired was that he's one of 4 players in NBA history to tally 17,000 points, 9,000 boards, and then 1,500 steals with 1,000 blocks. The other 3 are Hakeem Olajuwon, Karl Malone, and Kevin Garnett. But as we talked about before, Hakeem Olajuwon has 2 MVPs, 2 chips, and 2 Defensive Player of the Years. Karl Malone has an MVP and 2 finals appearances, and Kevin Garnett has an MVP and a chip. So
it's hard to argue when you put his name into a rarefied air, but that's the sort of stat that you bring up when you're talking about like how good of a season Devin Booker had in his rookie year.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not. You kind of do the person a disservice by putting them in that rarefied air, because it only serves to show you how vastly different kind of players they are. Anyway, Sean Marion would be like one of the worst players in the Hall of Fame, but like there's definitely worse players in there, and I think even though his like accolades don't like add up, like they don't stack up, and you're like, oh, you can't keep him out, he played for 2 really important teams, and he was an important player. Like anyone who followed the NBA in that time period would tell you that he was a really important player. So Sean Marion to the Hall of Fame one day, please.
Alright, and then the last bit of the news which came out today was 7'2" Filipino centre Kai Sotto will be signing with the G League, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic. And he was considered a 4-star prospect heading into this collegiate season, and like many of his other college colleagues, I don't know how good is that, he will be joining the G League in a move that has been happening quite a bit. Started a bit with LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton heading to the NBL last season, and now Jalen Green, who from most places you look at is projected to go number 1 in the 2021 draft. Isaiah Todd, the other guys in the G League, is less so, but just these big names, these big recruits, and even the biggest recruit is headed to a place that isn't college, and I think that's good. I think if these guys can get into an actual NBA fitness and training program, they can work out with older people. Like, I don't just mean old men, but they're working out with a lot of guys in the G League who are an NBA level. They're just not there skill wise, maybe, but maybe they are. Like, you'll be playing like 28-year-olds as opposed to
like men.
Yeah, and then I'm just going to handball to you when I say, like, as opposed to when Ja Morant plays X team in some X conference, because you're the college guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ja Morant played from Murray State, who played in the Mountain West. So the majority of the conference games that Ja Morant plays are probably not. There's probably not an NBA player on the other team. And even if you go play at Duke, I think there's like another 10 teams in the ACC. So you play them all twice, which means there's 20 games that you play in the ACC. Most teams play about 34 games. They probably play like 5 or 6 against like other good teams in different conferences, but that leaves like 8-ish teams every season where there's no, like they're from a shitty conference and there's no NBA talent. And the teams at the bottom of the ACC, which is like it's a really good conference. Like the teams in there is like Louisville and Virginia and North Carolina, Duke. It's really good teams, like a couple of national championships in the last decade in there. The worst team in the NBA, in the ACC, like Wake Forest plays in the ACC. Like the last time Wake Forest had an NBA player was
Chris Paul.
It wasn't Chris Paul, but it was a couple of years ago. So you're getting 2 games against Wake Forest and against a whole bunch of different teams in the ACC where there's no NBA talent. So it's not like they're bypassing this great competition pool for an unproven avenue,
Yeah, and they're getting paid, which is important. They're going to get paid an actual contract. So, Wake Forest, most recent player I can see is John Collins.
Yeah, cool.
There's only 6-7 players.
And then before John Collins, there wasn't anyone drafted since Al-Farouq Aminu. So, every player who's played Wake Forest since then has been playing against a below average.
Walked away happier.
Yeah, a below average outfit.
All right, let's move on to the mailbag.
Mailbag!
Give us the introduction.
Does the mailbag need any introduction?
No, it doesn't.
We have asked our fantastic listeners to send us questions, and we're going to answer them.
Yeah.
Is that a good intro?
Yeah, that's a great intro, and thank you to everyone who sent in questions. And
cheers heaps, cuz.
We hope you satisfy your craving for an answer.
Yeah, well, these are the definitive answers.
The cream of the crop.
NBA names, keep your ears open. I'm about to lay down what should happen. All right, let's kick things off with a question from friend of the pod, Alessio, who asks, should there be a 7 to 10 seed play-in to the playoffs if the final games of the season are cancelled? So this would basically pit the 7 seed through 10 seed against each other in a single game elimination, kind of like round robin, to see who gets the 8 seed and the 7 seed. And the idea behind it is basically this season give the Pelicans a chance to make the playoffs, because at the moment the Grizzlies sneak in, but if there was a 7 to 10, the Pelicans and Zion Williamson would have a chance to make the playoffs. It'd be a lot of fun.
It would be heaps of fun, but when we talk about this, we immediately say, wow, Zion versus Luka versus Ja Morant. Portland are a bit banged up, but at least you got some star power in Portland. Like, that's amazing. That's heaps of fun. And that is amazing. That would be heaps of fun. Yeah. But you look to the other conference and it's like, man, sign me up for fucking Brooklyn, who doesn't give a shit, and Kevin Durant says he's not going to play, versus Orlando, versus Washington, which are fun, versus Charlotte. And
it's pretty depressing.
Let's say you do a round robin and you play each of these teams once or twice, and in those 2 games, Terry Rozier or Devontae Graham just gets hot, and
Terry Rozier gets hot.
Sorry, yeah,
not likely.
Excuse me.
Not likely.
PJ Washington or Devontae Graham get hot, and then it's just 2 games. You can win 2 games.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Let's say they beat Brooklyn. What would you do if one of the lower seeds in this PJ Washington led Charlotte team beat Brooklyn and they steal their playoff spot, for example? Do Charlotte miss out on a lottery pick and Brooklyn get a better trade asset to trade for whichever star's available when they want to upgrade their roster? Or how do you do it seeding-wise? Do New Orleans keep their pick even if they make the playoffs?
No, I think you treat it as if Charlotte made the playoffs and New Orleans made the playoffs, and they would get a pick outside the lottery accordingly.
So can teams tank? because Brooklyn. This isn't
Brooklyn. Yeah, in theory, you could tank, but the benefit of this is that this probably isn't the draft to tank from the 16th pick to the 13th pick.
Well, I think let's say we are going to do a 7 to 10 playoff play-in. Would you? I was thinking of this question as come in and I was thinking of this question as is this a solution for the next 20 years? I was looking at it like that because it has been talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fun. It'd definitely be fun, but like, I don't see why you should say that numbers matter and your record matters only up to a certain point. And not even in terms of playoff seeding, but in terms of 11 through 15, your number has stratified you as a certain type of team. Your record has stratified you as a certain type of team, and that's where you deserve to be. But specifically for 10 through 7, that's different, and you just need to get in this one oddly specific band to be able to give yourself a chance to like jump up or whatever. It just seems like it kind of flies in the face of all the principles. I think the solution would to satisfy what the NBA, what people are really craving in like a tournament would just be for the NBA to go ahead with the much talked about but nothing ever done about mid-season tournament, which is like a direct something directly taken from European soccer, but that's really exciting because even in a season where, like, for example, Manchester City are winning the Premier League, the FA Cup, which is in-season single elimination
I know
tournament.
this now because I've been playing FIFA in quarantine.
You educated yourself. The FA Cup, which is has 5 rounds, and then you go through to the round of 16 quarterfinals, etc., etc. That offers you an outlet as a team, as a fan of a team who, you maybe you're mid-table or maybe you were expected to challenge for the title, but you're in 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
That offers you the ability to still kind of like get silverware.
Yeah.
And so like in a season, obviously like not a season like this where we've got a global pandemic influencing everything that happens, but like say, look at Zion, like if this was just like a regular season and you had Zion miss the first half of the season, but the Pelicans had managed to stay alive. They were 10th or 11th in the NBA standings, but they'd managed to somehow make it through to like the 4th round of the mid-season playoff or whatever, the mid-season tournament. Then Zion comes healthy and it's like, can the Pelicans make a run at the Kobe Cup or whatever? That's exciting, and you kind of fill the same role. But to do it to influence playoff standings as like a long-term thing, I think is just like the suspension of logic for no real specific purpose. Do you disagree?
Take that, Sean.
Do you disagree?
No, I completely agree with you. And when I read the question again, it says, should this happen for this season? That's essentially what he's asking.
It'd be fun though. I mean, like it would be...
Like, you're only helping the West, really, because
when the East product would be...
When your Phoenix Suns just missed the playoffs with 48 wins in, like, a stacked year...
Don't remind me.
That was like, quite BS, right?
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we remember about that team was that they were heaps of fun. They were really fast, 2 point guards. It's awesome. And it's like, but they never made the playoffs. Like, if you had actually made the playoffs and lost to Golden State or whoever it was in the first round, the Spurs, it's like, well, that's a bit of a... Like, of course you weren't going to do anything, but it's a bit like, they got swept or something like that. It's sort of... it's romantic that you guys didn't make it and you were such a good team.
If you were... Like I'm going to try and make a comparison here. If you were, say, let's say like Minnesota, you haven't made the playoffs you made the playoffs once in 20 years.
Yeah.
Since KG left or whatever, once in 15 years.
Yeah.
You're bad every single year. It's not really realistic that you're going to have any playoff success at all. It's not even realistic that you'll make the playoffs. Compare them to Portsmouth, who are a team now playing in Division 3, but once upon a time were like a mainstay of the Premier League, but they didn't really, like maybe they'd finish 14th one year and then maybe they'd jump up to 9th, but then the next year they were 14th again. Portsmouth made the FA Cup final in 2010. They lost But Portsmouth fans still remember that, and that's like the biggest moment of their club's history. Like they're the Portsmouth fans at the pub talking about the 2010.
Is that the one
Cup
with the
final.
Netflix show?
No, that's Sunderland.
Oh.
Sunderland Till I Die.
Silly
But
me.
and then on vice versa like that. So take someone like Arsenal.
Yeah.
Who the comparison that I'll make is maybe like the Boston Celtics. So they're a team with a lot of history, and they're one of like the most important teams in talking about the history of English football. But they haven't really had any success in the league for 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
They have won the FA Cup 3 times in the last 10 years, and Arsenal fans, like that gives them some satisfaction to be able to say like we won the FA Cup this year, and this year. So the fan bases are still engaged, and you still get that extra little like nibble, that extra bite at the apple. Even though Arsenal they want to win the league, but they finished 5th.
Fuck, my Watford Hornets lost 5-0 last year.
Yeah,
That
they did.
sucks.
They did.
Was
Manchester City ripped them apart.
No way.
Yeah.
Did they play well before then?
Well, they got to the final, Sean.
But was it like a little Cinderella story?
No, I mean, to get to the final...
I don't want to hear about it.
Get to the final of the FA Cup, you have to string a couple of wins together against good sides.
You just need Devontae Graham to get hot for 2 games.
Yeah, exactly. So you could say, this could be a situation where Charlotte has had nothing to talk about for 10 years, and then they win the Kobe Cup, and it's like, oh my God, do you remember when...
And everyone's like, hold the last 2 episodes of The Last Dance.
Do you remember when Miles Bridges dropped 44 in the Kobe Cup final? The idea of a cup final is really, really scintillating, because I can tell you about Didier Drogba's goal against Portsmouth in the 2010 FA Cup final. I can tell you about these crazy classic cup final moments. It's effectively like, let's just add a game 7 into the middle of the season. Instead of it being like LeBron James game 7 2016, it's like Carl Anthony Towns 55, 26 and 10 in the Kobe Cup final. It'd be cool, and it would satisfy the idea of a plan. We kind of got sidetracked from the original question, but
Sidetrack's good. All right, let's move on to the next question from Natalie Radio Frequency.
it's an interesting name.
Every single time I see Natalie RF, I think it means radio frequency.
Interesting.
What does she ask?
She asks, what are your opinions on whether or not Marvin Bagley will be a part of the Kings' long-term plans, and what we think about how the whole situation has been dealt with?
I think that he will be part of their long-term plans simply because he has to, and he is going to likely be one of those players that will live out the rest of his rookie contract because he's good enough to be on the team. He's going to get re-signed to an extension, this rookie extension, which is going to be about maximum 5 years. There's no reason not to extend him. He's not going to be.
But what do you extend him at?
Just something mid-tier, like maybe 10 mil a year or something.
But why?
Like Dwayne Dedman money.
I don't think he'd take 4 years 40.
Well, where else is he going to get more money? Like, let's say he was a free agent today.
He'd take the
qualifying offer.
I think he'd take the qualifying offer
and pull a nil into and then sign minimums for the rest of his life.
Because the thing is, the Kings are kind of fucked if they do, fucked if they don't. Because
that's like their motto, though, isn't it?
Yeah. if they don't trade him, then they're like committing to him, and they're saying like, let's see what we've got here. If they do trade him now, they're trading him for pennies on the dollar of what they drafted him at. The number 2 overall pick and 1 pick ahead of Luka fucking Doncic, for God's sake.
It's 1 pick behind DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah. The bloke has pretty much played like 70 games over 2 seasons. And this season I think he broke his hand, and then he like hurt his knee, and then he hurt his ankle. He played like 6 games this year, 7 games this year. Some revoltingly 13 games. So he's played over 2 seasons. He's played 75 games. So he's been available for less than half of the games. So the Kings are going into year 3 with the 2nd overall pick. They don't know
who the fuck he is.
Yeah, they don't know what play style suits him. They don't even know what position he is. You don't know if he's a 5 or if he's a 4. He played most of his minutes as a 4 as a rookie, and almost all of his minutes as a 5 as a big
because
this year.
Dwayne Dedman couldn't do it.
Yeah, because Dwayne Dedman couldn't do it. But the numbers were bad this year with him at the 5. Like obviously it's only 13 games, and he was injury ridden. So you kind of have to throw it out, but that's kind of the point, is that you're going into year 3 and you have no idea what this bloke's going to be. So at the end of year 3, you're going to be giving him his contract extension.
I think just like so he's not going to be as good as Luka Doncic. That's fair enough to say.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not a hot take. But I think he can still be a good basketball player, and he's also fun to watch. Like some of those dunks in his rookie season were really, really fun.
Yeah.
So I think if you just sort of treat it as a sunk cost, and not that you just get rid of him for pennies on the dollar, that you look at it and say, like, look, you're not going to be your typical second overall pick. You're just going to be a good role player who can fill out his role.
Yeah.
But that's fine, because like look at Andrew Wiggins. Like, he's not a superstar that everyone projected him to be. But if you're drafted Andrew Wiggins 30th, you'll be like, that's pretty cool, 20 points.
But if you drafted Andrew Wiggins 30th, you wouldn't be paying him $33 million a year.
Well, that's not Golden State's fault. That's Minnesota's fault.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
That's what I'm saying. If you can re-sign Marvin Bagley to a mid-tier contract, and you say, well, why would he do that? Well, just look at Neil and Samuel. Like, that could be you.
I think if he has a good season next year, like, I think if he has another season like his first 2 seasons, where either he's injury riddled or he plays like he played as a rookie and he just wasn't good, I don't think they offer him an extension, which is kind of why I say they're fucked if they do and fucked if they don't. Because then you don't offer, because if he's bad, you don't offer him an extension. But if he's even remotely good, you're gonna jump on it and say, like, we need to bring this guy back. But number 2 overall picks who rate themselves, and I don't know that he rates himself or whatever, but like, If Bogey Bogdanovic signs like a $18 million per year deal with the Kings this off season, which seems like it could happen, Marvin Bagley's not taking 4 years 40 in a year's time. There's no way. So the Kings are going to be either like, he's bad and let him go, and then it's a sunk cost on the pick because you fucked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you fucked it up royally. Or he's okay and he shows that he's good, and instead of signing him to a 4-year 10, you sign him to, like
4-year 70 because he's your guy. Yeah. I get that. I think they did a bit of a sneaky good thing here in trading for Jabari Parker, because you speak about second overall picks that rate themselves. So you've got Marvin Bagley walking around like he's the king, turns around and there's Jabari Parker where it's like, oh, try hard, trust me, try on defense, like it's good for you. And he's like a little gremlin, like he's like the bad guy in his head, always telling him to work harder. This could be you, look at me. The bad guy in
Jabari Parker's head never told him to work harder.
Alright, second question from that. We've got, do we think the 76ers will be keeping Horford, citing his inability to gel with the team? Dante.
I think that they will keep Horford, but not necessarily because they want to.
Yeah.
If you gave them an amnesty clause, I think they'd use it. Or if you said that, like, Team X wants to take Horford, I think they'd just handball it. They'd be like, you take it, Mini take it, we'll take whatever fucking salary you can cobble together. Because he just has looked so old this season, and in a way that you didn't really think that was going to happen.
There's also fit issues, because yes, he's declining and this could be his big drop off. It doesn't help that he's playing next to Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that was the theory was that he could operate away from the basket effectively enough to give space to work with Embiid, and then he could anchor bench units. And in the games that Embiid missed, Horford didn't have like this big role. Like, the 76ers were good when Embiid was out, but that was because they were playing with Simmons as like a small ball great, 5. Yeah. It wasn't because it was Simmons with Horford on the floor. Like, Horford, they're on offense, they're 0.7 points per 100 possessions worse with him on the floor, which isn't huge, but it's not anywhere near good, and it really confirms the eye test. When you're watching it just looks so gummy. Their whole team looks gummy. Horford can't really shoot threes at like a good enough clip. Embiid can't really shoot threes at a good enough clip where constantly...
His bark's better than his bite.
Yeah, his bark's better than his bite. Simmons doesn't shoot threes, so all of a sudden you're talking about, you've got your only 2 shooters on the court when you start is Tobias Harris and Josh Richardson, both of whom are good to great 3-point shooters, but not like defense warping.
I agree with you. I think the Sixers are going to be keeping him, and if you gave him truth serum, they'd probably say, yeah, we'll get off him for anything. But if a team, you mentioned Minnesota, says, "Oh yeah, we want them," and then Philly are just like, "Well, look, he's got 3 years left on his contract. You just cobble together whatever salary, like we'll take it." Like, it's gotten to the point where they would literally just salary dump him for spare parts. But usually a salary dump comes with attaching assets to a player. So if you look through Philly's assets at the moment, they have a handful of seconds, and I think there's like 6 second-round picks, and 4 second-round picks just got them Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson. So if you're going to gauge value around that, you've got Glenn Robinson and Alec Burks plus 2 second-round picks. Zaya Smith, who we still haven't seen much of, Shake Milton, who was almost instrumental on the team, and Matisse Tybalt, who it doesn't look like they're going to move him, but he's one of those young players on a rookie scale contract who could garner some attention. But if you're trading away Al Horford with Shake Milton or Matisse Tybalt attached to him, like, well, what are you getting back? Spare parts, like the John Salmons, Rudy Gay deal with Toronto, like. You're just going to get back crap for crap, but your crap's different.
I think the idea behind if they could get off the rest of his contract, which is after this season, 3 years, $80 million, so that's quite a lot. The idea would be that if they can clear that cap space and not take on any long-term money, then you can go back to the free agent world. In a season time.
Who's doing that? There's no process sixers who are just willing to take it.
It's true.
Unless you can trade a pick from like 2024.
Yeah.
But look, I'm scared that Golden State's just done that.
It would need to be someone who could convince themselves that they had the environment where Horford could survive, or not only survive, because you're not trading for a 34-year-old big man for him to survive, but for him to thrive.
Yeah.
I don't know who that team is. I can't even thinking of. You would need to be someone who's in playoff contention or close enough that they would be able to.
Well, the last 3 teams that just traded away a pick that was like past 2023 was Houston to get Russell Westbrook, the Clippers to get Paul George from OKC, and then Golden State to get a sign and trade with D'Angelo Russell. That wasn't actually an accidental cough, but it really fitted well. So they're the sort of teams. You've got 2 teams that are hoping to be a title contender, and 1 team that just saw a supreme value play in Golden State, who just like turned nothing into something, turned that into nothing again with Andrew Wiggins. So like if Philly are going to attach one of these future picks, get off their guy, I don't see any of these teams that are either close to the top who want just an aging Horford to buff them up, or one of these bad teams that can give them like process sixes. Can they get Drew Holiday or something? I don't really see any of those teams out there that would actually help the Sixers get better right now.
So the answer is he's going to stay, but no one's going to be happy about it.
And sadly, this might be the end of the Sixers. Like, you know, it's a bit blunt, but championships are hard to get, and especially when you've got LeBron being LeBron with Anthony Davis, you've got the Clippers, you've got Golden State that might be better.
Yeah.
You've got all these teams, and you've just made a huge misstep with your biggest asset.
The last team to win a championship with, like a max salary player who effectively was like their 7th best player was
2016 Cavs. In Kevin Love.
No, that's so harsh. The correct answer is no team ever. Like, it's not possible to have your, someone earning 28 milli, and he's effectively giving you not a lot. You just can't. It's not possible in terms of roster construction. And it's not like this team is loaded with like rookie contract role players. Matisse Tybalt was good, but was probably overrated as a rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, he averaged 5 points. So let's settle down Tabo Cephalosha Jr.
Well, no, it's Andre Roberson Jr.
Yeah, well, Andre Roberson.
Your second favourite player.
My second favourite player.
Behind Bobby Portis.
And then you mentioned Zaya Smith. We haven't seen him play. So he missed his whole rookie season. I think he played 6 games as a rookie. And then I don't know how many games he played this season, but almost none. So he's a nothing on that rookie contract. Like he can't, he's not even a contributor.
Yeah.
I think he spent most of the year in the G League. So this team's already stretched thin, and then you add the fact that Horford's contract is so big and no one's going to take it. I think the answer to the question is yes. They will be keeping him around, and his inability to gel with the team has nothing to do with that. I think they're just stuck financially.
But nobody tell Colch Kings they're selling a lot of Sixers jerseys at the moment and hats. The baseball caps that are like camo with an all-white 76ers logo.
No, thank you.
The final question here from Natalie is, who do we think are 3 players that have enormous talent on their own, but but not in their own team and situation, citing Ben Simmons in Philly at the moment. I'm just going to roll off my 3 names. I've got Jaylen Brown, Maxi Kleber, and Monty Morris.
Maxi Kleber?
Yeah, man. He's like the supreme role player in Dallas.
Maxi Kleber had one of the highest block rates in the league.
You're laughing too much. Anyway, let's move on to friend of the podcast, Sean Conlon, asking a very serious question here. Out of all the certified goons on Warriors teams of past, who is your favourite?
I'll let you have first stab at this one.
Alright, so for people who aren't aware what a goon is, just Google Matt Barnes. He's one of those guys that, you want on your team, but, other teams don't want to face him. Sort of like Draymond Green, but Draymond Green...
An instigator.
A
hard man.
An instigator that usually doesn't play very much basketball. So a goon's someone... Who is that guy like Raja Bell, but who is the guy... Maybe it is Raja Bell, but someone that they threw on Kobe and just said, like, try and punch him without getting it called.
Yeah, just
use
up your fight. Use up your 6 fouls.
So in doing a bit of research for this question, because yes, looking through the biggest goons of this Warriors team, it did take a little bit of research. I've gone with David West.
Yeah, late career David West is big goon energy.
Because he was obviously aging like everyone does. Father Time's undefeated, but as he got older, his muscles seemed to get bigger and bigger. Just like Horace Grant in The Last Dance. That dude is a chonker. And David West just looks fucking deadly, like with a little goatee, complete shaved head. Yeah. Also, he was good at basketball.
The 18-foot assassin.
18-foot assassin, but he would just come down, he would post you up, and then just throw behind the back pass, and you're like, oh fuck, not only did I just get bullied by this guy as I tried to pick a fight with Draymond, he just actually beat me in basketball. But yeah, so just before we go to you, I found an article from Bleacher Report in 2012 that went through the biggest goons in the league at the moment. And the topic came about after Jason Smith, that's New Orleans Hornets white big man,
sharpshooter.
He's a shooter. Jason Smith, quote, bodied Blake Griffin, got a 2-game suspension. The list went Matt Barnes, of course, Jason Smith, he was just talked about, Meta World Peace, Deshaun Stevenson, and third name, which I did not expect this at all, but Aaron Aflalo.
Really?
Yeah.
Aaron Aflalo's not a goon.
He's not a goon at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a smooth 15-point per game scorer in his prime.
Exactly. He's one of those guys that you don't want on your team.
Yeah.
And not because he's a bad guy, just because like, oh, fuck, all right, yeah, shoot 7 threes or whatever. Who's your biggest goon from these Warriors teams?
My biggest goon isn't as much of a goon as David West. He's more of like a lovable goon. It's Mo Spates.
Yeah.
Mo Buckets.
I really want a Mo Spates
because
jersey.
he just played 14 minutes a game. He averaged 8 points. He just come in and all of a sudden the offense is running through him and he just shoot a bunch of pick and pop jumpers. And then on defense, he was not afraid to throw his considerable girth around. And if you were just happened to be standing in the wrong spot or trying to cut past him, like you might fall victim to an outstretched hip. Yeah. Or maybe he really, really wanted that rebound and your face just happened to get in the way of his elbow. You know, it was never malicious. It was never like out and out. But like Mo Bucket's a sneaky, jovial goon.
Yeah, sometimes it's like that.
And he had that thing. He had that thing on his head that whenever he was getting hot on ESPN, and it's like
he looks like an orange.
He hits he hits a jumper and it sends it, they go to a media timeout and then it's like as it like zooms out and you just get the overhead shot of his head with the fucking mole on it, that growth. Mo Bucket's very, very dear to my heart.
My favourite Mo Bucket's memory is he's playing against DeMarcus Cousins in the game that wasn't Klay Thompson's 37-point quarter, but the game afterwards, and he was just getting a bit touchy-feely with DeMarcus Cousins, a guy that you can obviously piss off quite easily. He was doing his little goon tricks, and DeMarcus was like, "You're not calling these fouls, ref. You're not calling these fouls," and he got really pissed off. And then there must have been a foul on him on the other end. And then the next play down, DeMarcus just like stares at the ref and just freezes. And the ref's like, "Well, I'm passing the ball in, so fucking guard your guy. Stop talking to me." And he goes, "Nah, I'm just going to keep talking to you." So then Steph's got the ball, and Mo Buckets has no player guarding him. He is completely by himself. DeMarcus Cousins talking to the ref, and he sits atop the key and catches the mid-range jumper and makes it. So you've got no player on you, and you take a mid-range jumper.
An open lane.
And he took a mid-range jumper.
It sounds that's very Maurice Spates.
Love that. Next question, Dante.
So next question is from Claire Wingrove, who asks, do we have any tips on choosing an NBA team to follow?
Wholesome question.
Very wholesome question from Claire.
You go first.
So my tips will be anecdotal, and I'll talk about my 3 favourite teams and sort of why I decided to follow them. The first and my first and my greatest sporting love is Chelsea Football Club, and I chose them because I like the uniforms. The Phoenix Suns, I chose them because A, I like the uniforms, and B, I watched ESPN highlights of Steve Nash when I was like 10, and I was like, this guy is a white guy with long hair and he passes. I like it. And then my third team, the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, they were really bad one year. Had the number 1 overall pick, drafted a quarterback. I was just getting into the league. Again, I like the colour scheme. That's really clear. That's really important. You've got to like the colour scheme. Got to be. Would you buy a jersey? You know, I hate the colour red. Houston Rockets, off the table. Off the table. Anyway, the colour, so the colour scheme is really important, and also in the case of like a team like the Carolina Panthers, it can be really tempting to get on board at the ground level of a rebuilding project where a team that you like, they're young, up and coming, and you feel like maybe they'll be good in a couple of years. In that example, Carolina, it worked because 4 years later they're in the Super Bowl, and the quarterback Cam Newton, who they drafted, when I started following, he wins the MVP. So as a fan, you're like, oh my god, this is the greatest. But for every me with Carolina, there's a friend of the pod, Aless, who back in 2010 decided he was a Sacramento Kings fan for the same reasons, because they were young. They had one of the best young players in the game, Tyreek Evans, who we talked about on last week's pod. It didn't quite work out, and 10 years later the Kings haven't made the playoffs. So one thing that I would caution against, Claire, is just picking any young team because you think they're on the rise and saying, I'm going to get in on the ground floor and follow this up, because it doesn't always work out. What do you think, Sean?
Well, you went much more in depth than me. My tip was pick the team that's about to explode, sign Kevin Durant, and just win 73 games and make 5 of the next 5 finals. I went for the Golden State Warriors in 2012, just after they beat the Denver Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs, and thought, yeah, Kevin Durant's going to go there. 73 wins, it's a shoo-in. Like, may as well be a fan. So that's my first tip, but I really agree with your colour scheme thing. So second tip is whenever people ask me who they should go for, and I think like 2 or 3 people have asked me in the last couple of months, and the first thing I say is go for Miami. I tell everybody to go for Miami.
Because of the Miami Vice colour scheme?
No.
Just the black, red and white?
Because of Pat Riley.
Yeah.
Because while you're going for them, they're always going to win, be interesting, have someone like Derek Jones Jr. or Bam Adebayo. They've got a good coach. Yes, they've got really, really cool jerseys. I think they're like normal jerseys cool.
Yeah.
But the Miami Vice definitely helps that. And when they wear their retro jerseys with the stroke around the heat, that's pretty cool. Reminds me of Bimbo Coles.
Who's that?
He's a point guard from the 90s with Miami, and he was like, when they were bad, just had that really cool jersey. It was Bimbo fucking Coles. So go for Miami. That's my tip.
That's a good tip.
It is a good tip, man.
10 that's won 2 of the last 10 championships. And 3 of the last 20. It's not bad.
Most of the last free agencies. And they draft well.
Yeah, that is pretty good. That's a pretty good tip.
It's like the anti-Kings.
Yeah, they are the anti-Kings. I didn't mean to turn this into like a little Sacramento shade segment, but it has to be done.
Most of our podcasts do end up being a Sacramento shade.
The Kings did this, not me.
All right, we have 2 more questions to go. Dante, give us the first one.
This is a question from Adam Johnson. If you could change one NBA contract to whatever you wanted with no consequences, so it's kind of like an amnesty, which contract would you change and why? The example that Adam gives is that you could change John Wall's Supermax contract to like a 3-year, $15 million deal instead. So it's almost like an amnesty, but instead of waiving the player, you just change their contract to something a bit more reasonable. Who's your guy?
So I've gone with Steph Curry down from around 40 million a year to the minimum.
Yeah.
I think that's taking a bit of a piss with the question here from Adam.
Yeah.
But my realistic, obviously, the reasons why I would do that.
Yeah,
but my realistic scenario would be for Al Horford just to go down a fraction of his contract for everything we spoke about before.
If you can make Al Horford on 10 million a year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've written here minimum again, but yes, if you can make Al Horford...
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to abuse the rule.
Don't want to abuse this power I've just been given.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if you can pay Al Horford for the production that he's giving, and without a max, there's no pressure for him to fit in a square peg as a circle.
Exactly. Yeah. You can just he can just be your backup big man.
Yeah, and there's
and you can be good at it.
Yeah, you can say, like, look, you're the new Kyle Quinn, like, good on you.
Yeah.
There's no pressure to force him into this weird 3 big lineup. So, what's yours?
So I couldn't pick, but both of mine are on the same team. I've got 2 guys. They're both on the same team. So it would either be Dame Lillard or CJ McCollum. Okay. So CJ is earning 27 this year and Dame's earning 29. I really, really want to see what like a properly built team around Dame could look like. Yeah. Like imagine if they got wings better than Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless.
And Rodney Hood.
Like imagine if they just put, like a decent... Imagine if they drafted a decent role player, because obviously CJ and Nurkic are great, like second and third bananas.
Yeah.
But the rest of the talent on the roster has been like consistently pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
So if you could like cut CJ from 27, say like down to 10, then that opens up another like maybe 2 big contracts, like big role player contracts that you could sign with free agency or whatever. Same with Dame, like, it's really an either or. If you could bring those contracts down from like, close to 30 to like 10 or 12, then that would open up a whole bunch of flexibility for them to kind of go out and get somebody better, Like imagine if this team had like, healthy
Trevor Ariza.
Yeah, prime Trevor Ariza, like a healthy Robert Covington, or like, like if Rodney Hood was actually, like fucking good. Like a wing who can like run like a second unit offense,
like Lou Williams off the bench or something.
Yeah, exactly like that. I just feel like we're getting dangerously close to seeing Dame run out his career without ever having had like a proper team built around him. And I just want to see, I don't know if it's true, I don't even know what I think, but I want to see if Dame is one of these guys who can kind of like get a properly built team over the line, or if he's destined to just be like a second level star.
Well, yeah, it's sort of looking that way, because him and CJ are getting paid a lot of money, and yes, they're good together, and they made the Western Conference Finals with a huge asterisk because they didn't have to face one of the best teams until the actual Western Conference Finals. But yeah, like remember when after LaMarcus Aldridge went to the Spurs, Portland was supposed to rebuild, like Dame was committed to a tank, and then because he's so good, he just rose the stock of all the guys around him.
Yeah.
And like, Portland did the right thing. They surrounded their young player with young talent. The young talent was just better, and everyone grew. And then they're back on the treadmill of mediocrity.
Yeah.
Like they tried to get a high pick to draft another Trevor Ariza or someone like that.
Yeah.
But they sort of shot themselves in the foot by having a good player, which you can't blame them for. Why would you trade Dame? So,
But that's the key. Is the key is recognizing that you have a great player, and so you shouldn't commit to a rebuild, and you should try and go all in. But then being good enough to go as a GM, being good enough to go all in on the right players, and pick the right guys. I just want to see, like, can Dame be like Isaiah Thomas? Is Dame like that level of caliber point guard? Like, is Dame like in the conversation to be a top 10 point guard of all time?
Yeah.
Like, if in the next couple of years he can get a team a chip, like, does it change the way we think about him? Or is he going to be a dude who in 20 years you look back and you're like, oh, like 3 All-NBA first teams, that's pretty good. I didn't realize this guy was that good. I want him to have the best chance to succeed.
Well, in the same vein, because he's such a nice guy and he's done everything right in terms of sticking to the one team, being a good guy, having great playoff moments, and not just being a good guy.
Playoff moments.
Just being a good guy. No one's ever going to say, oh, he was never good enough. It's just like...
Yeah, but I just don't want
He's on his own treadmill of Hall of Fame-ocrity. You know what
I
mean?
Yeah.
He's never going to be a top... Well, maybe not top 10. He's never going to be one of the best guards. He's never going to be one of the worst. He'll still be in the Hall of Fame. He'll still have all these accolades, but no one's going to take him seriously because he might not have made the finals.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor Dame. All right, last question here from Andy is, who is the greatest coach ever, and why is it Greg Popovich? something we found difficult to do when we did our last awards pod was pick a coach of the year. I mean, I at least found it difficult because throughout every season there's always coaches like you've got Mike Budenholzer who's on the best team. You've got, in the past, you've had Steve Kerr, where he's the best coach on the best team. You've had coaches like Nick Nurse, who are finding efficient players, and Terence Davis and Chris Boucher, and just running exciting stuff, really wacky, weird stuff, box and one, etc. Or you've got someone like Eric Spoelstra in Miami, where he can nurture the growth of Bam. He can also nurture the egos of the older players like Jimmy Butler, but then they can also bring up all those guys in the background like Derek Jones Jr. and Tyler Hero is going to have a good rookie season. So it's like you've always got these arguments for each of these different coaches throughout the season. You usually default to give it to the winningest coach because you're never going to have a team that wins 70 games or 65 games with a bad coach and a bad philosophy. So when it comes down to all time, you've got all these arguments extrapolated out forever. And all these guys, you've got, instead of just one Greg Popovich and one Eric Spoelstra, you've got 50 in each different camp. I mean, I would say yes, just give it to Greg Popovich just because of the sheer sustained excellence, and he's done all this for so long, and the playoff streak and the 50-game win streak, titles across multiple eras. But also, I'm happy to give it to anybody else, but obviously not anybody else, but any other deserving candidate because there are so many deserving. But I'm just going to say, yep. It is Greg Popovich.
Greg Popovich, I think, is at worst second, but yeah. I think Phil Jackson's the best because Greg Popovich won 5. I think the argument for Greg Popovich and for that anyone who believes that the Spurs are like one of the best dynasties ever is you're like, well, like they didn't win 3 in 5 years. They won 5 in 20 years, but they were good from 1999 to 2019. They had so many different iterations and eras. They they were challenging, winning the NBA, they won the title when Shaq was, the best player and Kobe was young, and then they're winning it, 15 years later when they're versing LeBron and Shaq's retired and Kobe's on his way out and, that longevity. But that all happened over a 15-year period where they won their chips. They haven't obviously won since 2014 against the Heat, but they were good for another 4 or 5 years after that. So let's just call it 20. Let's just say 20 years. Mm-hmm. There was one point in time where Phil Jackson, as a head coach, had won 9 of the previous 11 NBA championships with 2 different teams. So I think that's pretty unimpeachable. Mm-hmm. And then, he had that second act to his career with the Lakers, where he won back-to-back in 09 and 10. So you're looking now at Phil Jackson's head coaching record in comparison of 20 years from 1990 1991 when he won his first to 2010 when he won his last. It's the same time frame except he won double the amount of championships as Greg Popovich. And Matt, definitely something that's been explored in The Last Dance is the idea that in the 90s, especially the second half of the 90s, the NBA was watered down. So it was easier for a combination of great coach and 2 great players to win a championship. It was more likely that they would. So maybe you you take that with a grain of salt, but then the teams that they were going against in 2009, 2010, you're talking about the primes of some really fucking great players, especially out in the West where the Lakers were. So anyway, I think it's Phil Jackson, but Greg Popovich is a worthy second place. Yeah.
Just like Kyrie Irving on who he wants to be his coach. You could flip a coin every morning. I'm happy to concede that. Well, that is all the questions from all our wonderful listeners. So thank you to everyone who took the time to ask a question. It means a lot, and thank you for listening to this episode.
Absolute cheers, cousins.